another professional gambler that I know, and I was like, so you're not, I asked him, if he wanted to talk about it. He's like, well, I'm not really doing Super Bowl props this year. And I was a bit surprised to hear that. And he told me that he used to do it all the time, but that now that he's gotten big enough, it's not really worth his time anymore. So it seems like something that like a lot of these professional gamblers and math guys use in the beginning to build up a bankroll, but that after a certain point, it's not really worth their time anymore.
That's correct. So the nice thing is, as professionals migrate up the food chain, it leaves openings, for I'll call them the beginning professionals.
Right.
The guys who aren't, making a fortune, but they're willing to spend the time to find the opportunities.
All right. So that leads perfectly into my next question, which is what do you do? How do you price out these props that you're pricing out? How long does it take you to price out one prop or a group of 10?
Well, there's some groundwork you have to do before you price any of the props. And for most props, there's two approaches you're going to use. And ideally, both approaches will agree. The first one is you assume the market price is correct for the spread and the total.
Right.
So right now, for example, Green Bay is a 2.5-point favorite with a 44.5 total. Now that may give you that gives you all kinds of other little facts you can use if you assume that you're going to have average distributions around that. For example, your average NFL team scores 22.3 points and has 332 yards. Now, if you look at the spread and the total, it's predicting that Green Bay is going to win about 23.5 to 21. And if you know that 8 yards of offense is the equivalent of 1 point, then you can look at that and say, I bet Green Bay, on average, will have about 342 yards of offense, and Pittsburgh will have 222 yards of offense. So Green Bay is about a 20-point favorite based on the market spread in total yards for the game. And once you have that anchor, you can then start breaking down other props. Now, the other way to price a prop, other than using the market spread, is to go back and look at the statistics for the teams, and this will often give you very different props. Last year, if you looked at the Colts Saints, all the stats favored the Saints, and the Colts were favored. Saints won. This year, if you look at the stats, it looks like the Pittsburgh should be a small favorite, and the under. So if you base it just on stats, you're going to be betting Pittsburgh on everything and under on everything. And you got to be careful doing that, because then you're going to have this monster correlated bet So I like to take kind of an average of both of them.
So how do you go about then what's the process for you to actually come up with your line on any specific prop? I mean, I guess you have a mathematical formula for each one?
You're making your best guess with the facts you have. So, for example, let's look at how many passing yards we think Aaron Rodgers will have. In his 14.5 games he played, he averaged about 270 yards. Pittsburgh's defense is about, I'm going to say, 5 yards better against the pass on average than most teams. So if you just look at that, you're going to say Rodgers is going to, he's going to have a slightly below average day, 265 yards. Now, if you use the market pricing, we say Green Bay is going to have 342 yards of total offense, and roughly, 74.5% of his yards are going to be passing. And I did that by getting the average of Green Bay's passing versus rush yards to Pittsburgh's pass versus rush yards allowed. Using that approach, you'd say he'd have about 255 yards. So I have two different estimates. One's at 265, one's at 255, and the over-under at Pinnacle right now is 275. And so when both of them line up on the same side, I think it's a solid bet to take under 275 yards for total passing.
So you have all these mathematical calculations, but let's say for the average bettor who's, a recreational bettor, let's say, but does still want to make, a positive EV bet, a couple positive EV bets on this game, and wants to, approximate the approaches that you use, what advice would you give to someone to look for that'll wind up with him roughly coming up with the same kinds of bets you make without having to go through all that math?
A good one for beginners to look at are the yes/no on touchdown scoring.
Right.
So because it's just people are going to bet the yes, because who wants to root for no scoring?
Right.
My perfect game is the game ends like 6-0.
Right. So the sort of like conventional wisdom that you hear is that the no's tend to have much greater value than the yeses just overall. And would you say that's still the case?
Not at the professional books or the big sports books in Vegas anymore, because the wise guys will pound the nose.
Really?
But at the rec books, I think that's still going to be the case.
So you would say that actually that doesn't, that the lines are roughly fair on the yes/no props at the professional books.
Yes, because the professionals will bet it until it is fair.
But the other side,
if I see a line that's off, where I have 20 cents the best of it, and I'm certain of it, then I'll keep betting it until it's gone.
But isn't it? I thought it was the case that the reason those lines are off is because the public overwhelms the wrong side. So to manage their risk, the books are just going to move the lines the other way and let the sharps bet the other side. Is that not still the case?
And they move it 20 cents, so I have a 20-cent advantage, and then I bet it and push it back. And there's so much professional money on the sharps, especially on the easy stuff, that the public really can't overwhelm it, except on a few of them.
All right. Well, thanks so much for doing this props overview with us once again, Justin.